Chapter 8, Thinking. Think for a moment how many times and in what ways you are using the word think in your day to day conversations. Sometimes, probably, you use it as a synonym to remember, I can't think of her name, pay attention, think about it, or convey uncertainty. I think today my friend will visit me. Think has a wide range of meanings which cover a number of psychological processes. However, in psychology, thinking is a core subject area with an independent existence and a meaning of its own. In this chapter, we will discuss thinking as a mental activity directed at solving a problem, making inferences, judging certain facts, and deciding and choosing between options. Further, the nature and characteristics of creative thinking, what it involves, and how it can be developed, will also be discussed. Have you ever seen a small child building a tower with blocks or sand? The child would build a tower, dismantle it, make another one, and so on and so forth. While doing this, the child sometimes talks to herself or himself. The speech would primarily include the steps he is following or want to follow. Not this, a little small, a tree at the back. Evaluation of the design. Nice. You also might have experienced talking to yourself while solving a problem. Why do we talk while we think? What is the relationship between language and thought? In this chapter, we shall also be discussing the development of language and the relationship between language and thought. Before starting our discussion on thinking, it is necessary to discuss thinking as the base of human cognition. Nature of thinking. Thinking is the base of all cognitive Thinking is the base of all cognitive activities or processes and is unique to human beings. It involves manipulation and analysis of information received from the environment. For example, while seeing a painting, you are not simply focusing on the color of the painting or the lines and strokes. Rather, you are going beyond the given text in interpreting its meaning and you are trying to relate the information to your existing knowledge. Understanding of the painting involves creation of new meaning that is added to your knowledge. Thinking, therefore, is a higher mental process through which we manipulate and analyze the acquired or existing information. Such manipulation and analysis occur by means of abstracting, reasoning, imagining, problem solving, judging, and decision making. Thinking is mostly organized and goal directed. All day to day activities, ranging from cooking to solving a math problem, have a goal. One desires to reach the goal by planning, recalling the steps that one has already followed in the past if the task is familiar, or inferring strategies if the task is new. Thinking is an internal mental process which can be inferred from overt behavior. If you see a chess player engrossed in thinking for several minutes before making a move, you cannot observe what he is thinking. You can simply infer what he was thinking or what strategies he was trying to evaluate from his next move. Building blocks of thought. We already know that thinking relies on knowledge we already possess. Such knowledge is represented either in the form of mental images or words. People usually think by means of mental images or words. Suppose you're traveling by road to reach a place which you had visited long back. You would try to use the visual representation of the street and other places. On the other hand, when you want to buy a storybook, your choice would depend upon your knowledge about different authors, themes, etc. Here, your thinking is based on words or concepts. We shall first discuss mental image and then move on to concepts as the base of human thought. Mental image. Suppose I ask you to imagine a cat sitting on a tree with its tail slightly raised and curved. You would most likely try to form a visual image of the whole situation, something similar to what the girl in the picture of figure 8.1 is doing. Or think of another situation where you are asked to imagine yourself standing in front of the Taj Mahal and describe what you see. While doing this, you are actually forming a visual image of the event. You are probably trying to see through your mind's eye, just like the way you would see a picture. Why is it useful to draw a map while giving directions to someone? Try to remember your earlier experience in reading a map, remembering the different places and subsequently locating them in a physical map in your examination. In doing this, you were mostly forming and using mental images. An image is a mental representation of a sensory experience. It can be used to think about things, places, and events. Concepts. How do you know that a lion is not a bird but a parrot is? You have already read this in chapter 7. Whenever we come across an object or event, familiar or unfamiliar, we try to identify the object or event by extracting its characteristics, matching it with the already existing category of objects and events. For example, when we see an apple, we categorize it as fruit. When we see a table, we categorize it as furniture. When we see a dog, we categorize it as an animal, and so on. When we see a new object, we try to look for its characteristics, match them with characteristics of an existing category, and if matching is perfect, we give it the name of that category. For example, while walking on the road, you come across an unfamiliar quadruped of a very small quadruped of a very small size with a face like a dog, wagging its tail and barking at strangers. You would no doubt identify it as a dog and probably think that it is of a new breed, which you have never seen before. You would also conclude that it would bite strangers. A concept, thus, is a mental representation of a category. It refers to a class of objects, ideas, or events that share common properties. Why do we need to form concepts? Concept formation helps us in organizing our knowledge so that whenever we need to access our knowledge, we can do it with less time and effort. It is something similar to what we do not organize our things at home. What we do to organize our things at home. Children who are very systematic and organized put their things such as books, notebooks, pen, pencil, and other accessories in specific places in their cupboard, so that in the morning they don't have to struggle to find a particular book or the geometry box. In the library too, you have seen books organized as per subject areas and labels so that you would be able to find them quickly with less effort. Thus, for making our thought process quick and efficient, we form concepts and categorize objects and events. If you will try the activity 8.2 by taking a piece of cardboard and cut triangles, circles, and squares of three different sizes each, small, medium, and large, then color them yellow. Similarly, prepare a second set and color them green, and a third set and color them red. Now you have a set of 27 cards varying in shape, size, and color. Ask a child of 5 to 6 years of age to group the similar cards together. So you will observe that there are a number of ways in which the child would respond. He would pile them up into different groups based on first size, all small triangles, squares, and circles together, all medium size together, and so on. 2, shape, all triangles together, all circles together, and so on. 3, color, all reds together, all yellows together, and so on. 4, both size and shape, all small triangles together, all medium triangles together, and so on. 5, size, shape, and color, all small circles of red color together, all medium circles of yellow color together, and so on. We have already learned about concept learning in chapter 6 and the use of concepts in human memory in chapter 7. Concepts usually fall into hierarchies or levels of understanding. The levels are classified as superordinate, the highest level, basic and intermediate level, and subordinate, the lowest level. While speaking, we mostly use basic level concepts. When a person says, I saw a dog, a basic level is used. Such a statement is much more likely to be made than I saw a four-legged animal that barks and wags its tails, or an animal. The first subordinate is far too specific than is needed for conversation, while the second superordinate is far too vague to convey the intended message. Children also learn basic level concepts first and then the other levels. Most of the concepts people use in thinking are neither clear nor unambiguous. They are fuzzy, they overlap one another and are often poorly defined. For example, under which category would you put a small stool? Would you put it under the category of chair or under the category of table? The answer to these questions is that we construct a model or prototype. A prototype is the best representative member of the category. Eleanor Rosch argues that in considering how people think about concepts, prototypes are often involved in real life. In prototype matching, people decide whether an item is a member of a category by comparing it with the most typical items of the category. Therefore, in the above example of the stool, you would try to compare it with the standard study chair. If you consider it as a typical example of a chair, and a small study table, if you consider it as the typical example of a table, and then match the properties of the stool, and then the match the properties of the stool with these two concepts. If it matches with a chair, you would put it under the category of chair. Otherwise, under the category of table, consider another example, the concept cups. First are concrete objects, second are concaves, third can hold solids and liquids, fourth have handles. What about cups we see in the market with no handle, with a square shape but unusually big in size? In an experiment, the participants were shown the pictures of cups, as we can see in figure 8.3 of this chapter. And W. Lebo asked them, which of these would you describe as the prototype for the concept cup? Participants mostly chose number 5. Interestingly, some participants called number 4 a bowl and number 9 a vase because they were so different. Culture and thinking. Our beliefs, values, and social practices influence the way we think. In a study conducted on American and Asian students, pictures like the following underwater scene were used. The subjects were asked to have a look at the scene for a brief period and then were asked to describe what they saw. The American students focused on the biggest, brightest, and most outstanding features. For example, the large fish swimming to the right. In contrast, the Japanese students focused on the background. For example, the bottom was rocky or the water was green. Based on these kinds of findings, researchers have concluded that Americans usually analyze each object separately, which is called analytical thinking. Asian people, Japanese, Chinese, Koreans think more about the relationship between objects and backgrounds, which is called holistic thinking. The processes of thinking. So far, we have been discussing what we mean by thinking and what is the nature of thinking. We also learned that thinking uses mental images and concepts as the base. Now, we will discuss how thinking proceeds in a particular area, problem solving. Problem solving. How do we proceed while repairing a broken cycle or planning a summer tour or patching up a broken friendship? In some cases, the solution is reached quickly, as in repair of a bicycle based on immediately available cues, whereas others are more complex and require time and effort. Problem solving is thinking that is goal directed. Almost all our day to day activities are directed towards a goal. Here it is important to know that problems are not always in the form of obstacles or hurdles that one faces. It could be any simple activity that you perform to reach a defined goal. For example, preparing a quick snack for your friend who has just arrived at your place. In problem solving, there is an initial state, that is the problem, and there is an end stage, the goal. These two anchors are connected by means of several steps or mental operations. You can try out the problems given in activity 8.3 with your friends and observe how they are approaching the problem. You can ask them the steps they follow while solving these problems. Table. Mental operations involved in solving a problem. Mental operation. Identify the problem. Nature of problem for this is a week is left for teacher's day and you are given the task of organizing a play. Mental operation second is represent the problem. Nature of problem for this is organizing a play would involve identification of an appropriate theme, screening of actors, actresses, arranging money, etc. Third mental operation is plan the solution subset, set sub goals. Nature of problem for this is search and survey various available themes for a play and consult teachers and friends who have the expertise. The play to be decided based on such considerations as cost, duration, suitability for the occasion, etc. Fourth mental operation is evaluate all solutions, plays, collect all the information, storage, rehearsal, Evaluate all solutions. Please collect all the information, storage, rehearsal. Select one solution and execute it. Compare and verify the various options to get the best solution. The play. 6. Evaluate the outcome. If the play solution is appreciated, think about the steps you have followed for future reference for yourself as well as for your friends. 7th mental operation is rethink and redefine problems and solutions. Nature of problem for this is after this special occasion, you can still think about ways to plan a better play in future. Obstacles to solving problems. Two major obstacles to solving a problem are mental set and lack of motivation. Mental set. Mental set is a tendency of a person to solve problems by following already tried mental operations or steps. Prior success with a particular strategy would sometimes help in solving a problem. However, this tendency also creates a mental rigidity that obstructs the problem solver to think of any new rules or strategies. Thus, while in some situations mental set can enhance the quality and speed of problem solving, in other situations it hinders problem solving. You might have experienced this while solving mathematical problems. After completing a couple of questions, you form an idea of the steps that are required to solve these questions, and subsequently you go on following the same steps until a point where you fail. At this point, you may experience difficulty in avoiding the already used steps. Those steps would interfere in your thought for new strategies. However, in day to day activities, we often rely on past experiences with similar or related problems. Like mental set, functional fixedness in problem solving occurs when people fail to solve a problem because they are fixed on things usual function. If you have ever used a hardbound book to hammer a nail, then you have overcome functional fixedness. Lack of motivation. People might be great at solving problems, but all their skills and talents are of no use if they are not motivated. Sometimes people give up easily when they encounter a problem or failure in implementing the first step. Therefore, there is a need to persist in their effort to find a solution. Reasoning. If you find a person desperately running on the railway platform, you could infer a number of things, such as he is running to catch the train which is about to leave. He wants to see off his friend sitting in the train which is about to leave. He has left his bag in the train and wants to get in before the train leaves the station. To figure out why this person is running, you could use different kinds of reasoning, deductive or inductive. Deductive and inductive reasoning. Since your previous experience indicates that people run on the platform to catch a train, you would you would conclude that this person is getting late and is running to catch the train. The kind of reasoning that begins with an assumption is called deductive reasoning. Thus, deductive reasoning begins with making a general assumption that you know or believe to be true and then drawing a specific conclusion based on this assumption. In other words, it is reasoning from general to particular. Your general assumption is that people run on the railway platform only when they are getting late for the train. The man is running on the platform, therefore, he is getting late for the train. One mistake that you are making, and generally people do commit such mistakes in deductive reasoning, they is that you they assume but do not always know if the basic statement or assumption is true. If the base information is not true, that is, people also run on the platform for other reasons, then your conclusion would be invalid or wrong. Another way to figure out why the man is running on the platform is to use inductive reasoning. Sometimes you would analyze other possible reasons and observe what the man is actually doing and then draw a conclusion about his behavior. Reasoning that is based on specific facts and observation is called inductive reasoning. Inductive reasoning is drawing a general conclusion based on particular observation. In the earlier example, you observe the other person's subsequent actions or actions, such as entering into the train compartment and returning with a bag. Based on the observation, you would conclude that the person had left his bag in the train. One mistake you would probably make here is jumping to a conclusion without knowing all possible facts. From the above discussion, we can conclude that reasoning is the process of gathering and analyzing information to arrive at conclusions. In this sense, reasoning is also a form of problem solving. The goal is to determine what conclusions can be drawn from a certain given information. Most cases of scientific reasoning are inductive in nature. Scientists and even lay persons consider a number of instances and try to determine what general rule covers them all. Think of yourself using your knowledge of problem solving steps discussed earlier in planning for a play or conducting a project. Your inductive reasoning is being applied here. Analogy is another form of reasoning which involves four parts: A is to B as C is to D, with the relation between the first two parts being the same as the relation between the last two. For example, water is to fish as air is to human, while white is to snow as black is to coal. Analogies can be helpful in solving problems. They help us They help us in identifying and visualizing the salient attributes of an object or event which would otherwise go unnoticed. Decision making, inductive and deductive reasonings allow us to make judgments. In judgment, we draw conclusions from opinions, evaluate events, objects based on knowledge and available evidences. Consider this example: the man is very talkative, likes to mix with people, can convince others with ease. He would be most suitable for a salesperson's job. Our judgment of this person is based on the specific characteristics of an expert salesperson. Here we will discuss how we make decisions and judgments. Sometimes judgments are automatic and require no conscious effort by the person and occur as matter of habit. For example, applying brakes and seeing the red light. However, evaluating a novel or a literary text requires reference to your past knowledge and experience. Judging the beauty of a painting would involve your personal preferences. Thus, our judgments are not independent of our beliefs and attitudes. We also make changes in our judgments based on newly acquired information. Consider this example: a new teacher joins the school. Students make on the spot judgment of the teacher as being very strict. However, in subsequent classes, they closely interact with the teacher and make changes in their evaluation. Now they judge the teacher to be extremely student friendly. Many of the problems you solve each day require you to make decisions: what to wear for the party, what to eat for dinner, what to say to your friend. The answer to all this lies in picking or choosing one of several choices. In decision making, we sometimes choose among options based on choices of personal significance. Judgment and decision making are interrelated processes. In decision making, the problem before us is to choose among alternatives by evaluating the cost and benefit associated with each alternative. For example, when you have the option to choose between psychology and economics as subjects in class 11, the decision would be based upon your interest, future prospects, availability of books, efficiency of teachers, etc. You could evaluate them by talking to seniors and faculty members and attending a few classes, etc. Decision making differs from other types of problem solving. In decision making, we already know the various solutions or choices, and one has to be selected. Suppose your friend is a very good player of badminton. She is getting an opportunity to play at the state level. At the same time, the final examination is approaching and he needs to study hard for it. He will have to choose between two options: practicing for badminton or studying for the final examination. In this situation, his decisions will be based upon evaluation of all possible outcomes. You would observe that people differ in their priorities and therefore their decisions will differ. In real life situations, we take quick decisions and therefore it is not possible always to evaluate every situation thoroughly and exhaustively. Nature and process of creative thinking. You might have wondered at times how someone, for the first time, thought of acts like planting a seed or devising a wheel or decorating the walls of caves with drawings, etc. Perhaps not satisfied with the old ways of carrying out day to day activities, such persons thought of something original. There are countless others whose creativity has led to the present day scientific and technological progress that we now enjoy. Music, painting, poetry, and other forms of art that give us pleasure and joy are all products of creative thinking. You might have heard about A.T. Cave, a botanist from our country who got the UK's Top Energy Award for devising a smokeless chula. He converted dry, useless sugarcane leaves into clean fuel. You might have also heard of Class 11 student Ashish Pamwar, who won a bronze medal for assembling a 5 feet tall robot at the first International Robotics Olympiad held at Glasgow. These are only a few examples of creativity. Try to think of some other examples of creativity in different fields. It is important to remember that creative thinking is not always expressed in extraordinary work. One does not have to be a scientist or an artist to be a creative thinker. Everyone has the potential to be creative. Creative thinking can be applied in almost any area of human activity at different levels. It could be reflected in activities like writing, teaching, cooking, enacting roles, storytelling, conversation, dialogues, asking questions, playing games, trying to solve day to day problems, organizing activities, helping others resolve conflicts, and so on. This concept of everyday creativity, which is reflected in one's way of perceiving, thinking, and problem solving, is different from the special talent creativity seen in outstanding creative achievements. Nature of creative thinking. Creative thinking is distinguished from other types of thinking by the fact that it involves the production of novel and original ideas or solutions to problems. Sometimes creative thinking is understood just as a new way of thinking or thinking differently. However, it is important to note that besides novelty, originality is also an important characteristic of creative thinking. Every year, new models of household appliances, tape recorders, cars, scooters, and television sets produced may not be original unless unique features are added to these products. Creative thinking thus refers to originality and uniqueness of ideas or solutions that did not previously exist. Creative thinking is also generally characterized by what Brunner calls effective surprise. If the product or idea is unusual, the response of most who experience it is one of instant surprise or of being startled. Another important criterion that characterizes creative thinking is its appropriateness in a particular context. Simply thinking of being different without any purpose, doing things in one's own ways, being nonconformist, indulging in fantasy without any purpose, or coming out with a bizarre idea is at times mistaken for creative thinking. Researchers tend to agree that thinking is said to be creative when it is reality oriented, appropriate, constructive, and socially desirable. J.P. Guilford, a pioneer in creativity research, proposed two types of thinking: convergent and divergent. Convergent thinking refers to thinking that is required to solve problems which have only one correct answer. The mind converges to the correct solution. To illustrate, look at the question given below. It is based on a number series where you have to find the next number. Only one right answer is expected. Question 369. What will come next? Answer is 12. So now you try to think of certain questions for which there is no one right answer but many answers. A few such questions are given below. First, what are the various uses of cloth? 2. What improvements will you suggest in a chair so that it becomes more comfortable and aesthetically pleasing? Third, what will happen if examinations are abolished in schools? Answers to the above questions require divergent thinking, which is an open ended thinking where the individual can think of different answers to the questions or problems in terms of his or her experiences. Thus, such kind of thinking helps in producing novel and original ideas. Divergent thinking abilities generally include fluency, flexibility, originality, and elaboration. Fluency is the ability to produce many ideas for a given task or a problem. The more ideas a person produces, the higher his fluency ability. For example, more the number of uses of a paper cup, more would be the fluency. Flexibility indicates variety in thinking. It may be thinking of different uses. It may be thinking of different uses of an object or different interpretation of a picture, story, or different ways of solving a problem. In case of uses of a paper cup, for example, one may give an idea to use it as a container or to draw a circle, etc. Originality. It is the ability to produce ideas that are rare or unusual by seeing new relationships, combining old ideas with new ones, looking at things from different perspectives, etc. Research has shown that fluency and flexibility are the necessary conditions for originality. The more and varied ideas one produces, the greater the likelihood of original ideas. Elaboration. It is the ability that enables a person to go into details and work out implications of new ideas. Divergent thinking abilities facilitate generation of a variety of ideas which may not seem to be related. For example, what are the common ideas for enhancing food production? The likely answers would be related to quality of seeds, fertilizers, irrigation, and so on. If someone thinks of cultivation in a desert for extracting protein from weeds, it would be a remote idea. The association here is between food production and desert or weeds. Ordinarily, we do not associate these together, but if we let our mind free to seek new and remote associations, a number of combination of ideas may arise out of which one or two may turn out to be original. You must remember that both convergent and divergent thinking are important for creative thinking. Divergent thinking is essential in generating a wide range of ideas. Convergent thinking is important to identify the most useful or appropriate idea. Lateral thinking. Edward de Bono has used the term lateral thinking to what Guilford termed as divergent thinking. He makes a distinction between vertical thinking and lateral thinking. Vertical thinking involves mental operations that move in a straight line back. He makes a dis- he makes a distinction between vertical thinking and lateral thinking. Vertical thinking involves mental operations that move in a straight line back and forth between lower and higher level concepts, whereas lateral thinking involves looking for alternative ways of defining and interpreting problems. He states vertical logical thinking digs the same hole deeper, that is, thinking deeper in the same direction. Lateral thinking is concerned with digging a hole in another place. De Bono suggests that lateral thinking can help make mental leaps and is likely to create a number of ways of thinking. De Bono developed the six thinking hats technique to stimulate different modes of thinking. One can put on or take off these hats according to the type of thinking required to be used. While hat means gathering information, facts, figures, and filling gaps in information, red hat covers expressions of feelings and emotions on the subject. Black hat represents judgment, caution, and logic. Yellow hat covers thinking on what will work and why it will be beneficial. Green hat is for creativity, alternatives, and changes. Blue hat represents thinking about the process and not the ideas as such. The six thinking hats reflect different perspectives from which an issue or problem is viewed. The technique can be used individually as well as in groups. Process of creative thinking. In recent years, more and more attention has been given to the way the human mind operates. Research has made it clear that thinking of new and unusual ideas involves more than a flash of insight. There are stages before and after the new ideas come. The starting point in creative process is the need to think or bring out something new, which initiates the effort. Not everyone experiences this need, as one can be happy and contented in carrying out routine work. The need for search of new ideas and solutions arises from sensing problems and gaps in information. The process of creative thinking begins with the preparation stage that requires one to understand the task or problem in hand, analyze the problem, and become aware of the background facts and related information. The process evokes curiosity and excitement to think more and more in different directions. The person tries to look at the task or problem from different angles and viewpoints. Here, divergent thinking abilities discussed earlier play their role to help one extend in new directions. Coming back to the process, when the person is trying to generate alternative ideas and trying to view the problem or task from an unusual perspective, there may be a feeling of getting stuck. One may even get disgusted with failure and may leave the problem or the task for some time. This is the stage of incubation. Research shows that the creative ideas may not occur immediately during incubation when the individual is not consciously thinking about the problem but seeking relaxation from conscious effort. They may occur or strike when a person is doing something else, for example going to sleep, waking up, taking a bath. For example, going to sleep, waking up, taking a bath, or just walking along. Followed by incubation is the stage of illumination, the aha, or I have found it experience, the moment we normally associate with the emergence of creative ideas. There usually is a feeling of excitement, even satisfaction, or having found a creative idea. Last is the stage of verification when the worth or Appropriateness of ideas or solutions are tested and judged. Here, convergent thinking plays its role in selecting the appropriate idea or solution that works. Developing creative thinking. As discussed in the previous section, you may recall that the potential for creative thinking is in all of us. It is not limited to a few talented artists or scientists or to a chosen few. The expression of creative thinking may vary from individual to individual, although hereditary factors are important in determining the extent of which to which one can be creative. Environmental factors facilitate or hamper the development of creative thinking abilities. Research in different countries, including India, has shown a slump in the level of creative thinking of school children at different Research in different countries, including India, has shown a slump in the level of creative thinking of school children at different stages due to environmental factors. On the other hand, research also indicates that children from lower socioeconomic groups, ethnic and minority groups have substantial untapped creativity and that they are creative in many different ways. Research has also shown that all of us can make better use of our abilities for creative thinking through practice and training. We can become more imaginative, flexible, and original in solving day to day problems creatively and effectively. Development of creative thinking is important for one's personal growth and fulfillment. Barriers to creative thinking. The first step in developing creative thinking is to identify inhibiting factors that impede creative expression and then make conscious attempts to overcome the same. Barriers to creative thinking. The first step in developing creative thinking is to identify inhibiting factors that impede creative expression and then make conscious attempts to overcome the same. As we are discussing, you may analyze how you approach your tasks and problems. There are blocks to creative thinking which can be categorized as habitual, perceptual, motivational, emotional, and cultural. Although much habitual learning is necessary for smooth and efficient functioning within the daily routine, the tendency to be overpowered by habits, particularly in one's ways of thinking, can be detrimental to creative expression. We become so used to thinking and perceiving things in a familiar way that it becomes difficult to think in novel ways. It may be related to our tendency to quickly jump to conclusions, not to see problems from fresh perspectives, be satisfied with routine patterns of doing things, or resist to overcome preconceived viewpoints and not to change immediate judgment, etc. The perceptual blocks prevent us from being open to novel and original ideas. Try to recall the joining dot problem in activity 8.3 where you were required to connect all 9 dots with 4 straight lines going through each dot only once without lifting the pencil or pen from the paper. The solution to the problem lies in going beyond the boundaries. We assume that boundaries exist whereas they did not. Many would attempt to solve the problem by staying in the square that the 9 dots form. There is nothing in the directions to do this. The joining dots problem is indicative of the boundaries and the limitations that are assumed or self-imposed. Motivational and emotional blocks also interfere with creative thinking, which show that creative thinking is not merely a cognitive process. Lack of motivation, fear of failure, fear of being different, fear of ridicule or rejection, poor self-concept, negativism, etc. may hamper creative thinking. For example, some people may not be motivated enough to extend themselves and make extra efforts. A person may find that he cannot do it further, may leave the problem in between, or may accept the intermediate idea as the final idea. Further, some people, for example, have negative assumptions about themselves. They feel that they are not capable of doing some tasks. You may be surprised to know that Thomas Alva Edison, the inventor of the bulb, took years of experimentation with hundreds of failures before he produced the first bulb. Cultural barriers are related to excessive adherence to traditions, expectations, conformity pressures, and stereotypes. Conformity to some extent is essential for social existence, but excessive conformity to traditions, rituals, and procedures are likely to block creative thinking. Cultural blocks arise due to the fear of being different, the tendency to maintain status quo, willingness to accept mediocrity, preservation of personal security, social pressure, overdependence on others, etc. The fact that everyone has the potential to be creative and that one can differ in one's expression of creative thinking requires that we all tap our creative potential and remove the barriers as we have discussed above. Strategies for creative thinking. Research on characteristics of creative people has revealed that there are certain attitudes, dispositions, and skills which facilitate creative thinking. Here are some strategies to help you enhance your creative thinking abilities and skills. Become more aware and sensitive to be able to notice and respond to feelings, sights, sounds, textures around you. Spot problems, missing information, anomalies, gaps, deficiencies, and so on. Try to notice contradictions and incompleteness in situations that others may not do. For this, cultivate the habit of wider reading, exposure to a variety of information, and develop the art of asking questions, pondering over the mysteries of situations and objects. Generate as many ideas, responses, solutions, or suggestions on a given task or situation to increase your flow of thoughts. Try deliberately Try deliberately to look for multiple angles of a task and situation to increase flexibility in your thinking. It could be, for example, thinking of alternative arrangements of furniture in a room to generate more space, different ways of conversing with people, looking for costs and benefits of a course of study or careers, looking for ways of dealing with an angry friend, helping others, etc. Strategies for creative thinking. Research on of Research on characteristics of critic people has revealed that there are certain attitudes, dispositions, and skills which facilitate creative thinking. Here are some strategies to help you enhance your creative thinking abilities and skills. Become more aware and sensitive to be able to notice and respond to feelings, sights, sounds, textures around you. Spot problems, missing information, anomalies, gaps, deficiencies, and so on. Try to notice contradictions and incompleteness in situations that others may not do. For this, cultivate the habit of wider reading, exposure to a variety of information, and develop the art of asking questions, pondering over the mysteries of situations and objects. Generate as many ideas, responses, solutions, or suggestions on a given task or situation to increase your flow of thoughts. Try deliberately to look for multiple angles of a task and situation to increase flexibility in your thinking. It could be, for example, thinking of alternative arrangements of furniture in a room to generate more space, different ways of conversing with people, looking for costs and benefits of a course of study or career, looking for ways of dealing with an angry friend, helping others, etc. Osborne's brainstorming technique can be used to increase fluency and flexibility of ideas to open-ended situations. Brainstorming is based on the principle that producing ideas should be kept separate from the evaluation of their worth. The basic assumption is to let the minds think freely, and the tendency to put judgment on the worth of ideas may be postponed. That is, imagination should be given priority over judgment till all the ideas are exhausted. This helps in increasing the fluency of ideas and piling up alternatives. Brainstorming can be practiced by playing brainstorming games with family members and friends, keeping its principles in mind. Use of checklists and questions often provide a new twist for ideas like what other changes, what else, in how many ways could it be done, what could be the other uses of this object, and so on. Originality can be developed by practicing fluency, flexibility, habit of associative thinking, exploring linkages, and fusing distinct or remote ideas. A creative thinker, it is said, may not evolve new ideas but evolve new combination of ideas. It is the chain of thoughts and cross fertilization of ideas that may bring out something new. The idea of the rocking chair has come from the combination of chair and seesaw. Practice making unusual and unexpected associations using analogies, sometimes finding original ideas. Solutions requires a dramatic shift of focus which can be facilitated by asking oneself what is the opposite of the commonplace or usual solution to the problem. Allow conflicting thoughts to coexist, looking for solutions opposite to the obvious may lead to original solutions. Engage yourself more frequently in activities which require use of imagination and original thinking rather than routine work according to your interests and hobbies. It may be decorating the house, improvising or redesigning of old objects, making use of waste products in multiple ways, completing incomplete ideas in unique ways, giving new twists to stories or poems, developing riddles, puzzles, solving mysteries, and so on. Never accept the first idea or solution. Many ideas die because we reject them thinking that the idea might be a silly idea. You have to first generate a number of possible ideas or solutions, then select the best from among them. Get a feedback on the solution you decide on from others who are less personally involved in the task. Try to think of what solutions someone else may offer for your problems. Give your ideas a chance to incubate, allowing time for incubation between production of ideas and the stage of evaluation of ideas may bring in the aha experience. Sometimes ideas cluster like branches of a tree. It is useful to diagram your thinking so that you can follow each possible branch to its completion. Resist the temptation for immediate reward and success and cope with the frustration and failure. Encourage self evaluation, develop independent thinking in making judgments, figuring out things without any help or resources. Visualize. Visualize causes and consequences and think ahead. Predicting things that have never happened, like suppose the time starts moving backwards, what would happen if we had no zero, etc. Be aware of your own defenses concerning the problem. When we feel threatened by the problem, we are less likely to think of creative ideas. Last but not the least, be self confident and positive. Never undermine your creative potential, experience the joy of your creation. Thought and language. Till now, we have discussed the nature and meaning of thinking and how thinking is based on images and concepts. We have also discussed the various processes of thought. Throughout the discussion, did you feel that words or language are essential to express what we think? This section examines the relationship between language and thought, that language determines thought, that thought determines language, and that thought and language have different origins. Let us examine these three viewpoints in some detail. Language as determinant of thought. In Hindi and other Indian languages, we use a number of different words for various kinship relationships. We have different terms for mother's brother, father's elder brother, father's younger brother, mother's sister's husband, father's sister's husband, and so on. An English person uses just one word, uncle, to describe all these kinship relationships. In the English language, there are dozens of words for colors, whereas some tribal languages have only 2 to 4 color terms. Do such differences matter for how we think? Does an Indian child find it easier to think about and differentiate between various kinship relationships compared to her English speaking counterpart? Does our thinking process depend on how we describe it in our language? Benjamin Lee Whorf was of the view that language determines the contents of thought. This view is known as linguistic relativity hypothesis. In its strong version, this hypothesis holds what and how individuals can possibly think is determined by the language and linguistic categories they use. Linguistic determinism. Experimental evidence, however, maintains that it is possible to have the same level or quality of thoughts in all languages depending upon the availability of linguistic categories and structures. Some thoughts may be easier in one language compared to another. Thought as determinant of language. The noted Swiss psychologist Jean Piaget believed that thought not only determines language but also precedes it. Piaget argued that children form an internal representation of the world through thinking. For example, when children see something and later copy it, a process called imitation thinking does take place when which does not involve language. A child's observation of others' behavior and imitation of the same behavior No doubt involves thinking but not language. Language is just one of the vehicles of thinking. As actions become internalized, language may affect children's range of symbolic thinking but is not necessary for the origins of thought. Piaget believed that though language can be taught to children, understanding of the words require knowledge of the underlying concepts, that is thinking. Thus, thought is basic and necessary if language is to be understood. Different origins of language and thought. The Russian psychologist Lev Vygotsky argued that thoughts and language develop in a child separately until about 2 years of age, when they merge. Before 2 years, thought is pre-verbal and is experienced more in action. Piaget's sensory motor stage. The child's utterances are more automatic reflexes, crying when uncomfortable, than thought-based. Around 2 years of age, a child expresses thought verbally and his speech reflects rationality. Now, children are able to manipulate thoughts using soundless speech. He believed that during this period, the development of language and thinking become interdependent. The development of conceptual thinking depends upon the quality of inner speech and vice versa. Thought is used without language when the vehicle of thinking is nonverbal, such as visual or movement related. Language is used without thought when expressing feelings or exchanging pleasantries. For example, good morning, how are you? Very well, I am fine. When the two functions overlap, they can be used together to produce verbal thought and relation and rational speech. Development of language and language use. Meaning and nature of language. In the previous section, we discussed the relationship between language and thought. In this section, we will examine how human beings acquire and use language in different age groups. Think for a moment. What would have happened if you did not have a language to express whatever you wanted to say? In the absence of language, you will not be able to communicate your ideas and feelings, nor will you have the opportunity to know or have access to what others think and feel. As a child, when you first started saying ma, 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 it not only gave you a tremendous boost to continue repeating this activity but also was a great moment of joy for your parents and other caregivers. Slowly, you learn to say ma and papa, and sometime later combine two or more words to communicate your needs, feelings, and thoughts. You learned words appropriate for situations and also learned the rules of putting these words in sentences. Initially, you learned to communicate in the language being used at home, usually the mother tongue. Went to school and learned the formal language of instruction. In many cases, this language is different from the mother tongue and were promoted to higher grades and learnt other languages. If you look back, you will realize that your journey from crying and saying ma 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 to the attainment of mastery in not one but many languages has been a fascinating one. In this section, we shall be discussing the salient features of language acquisition. You have been using language all your life. Now try to define accurately what it is that you have been using. Language consists of a system of symbols organized by means of certain rules that we use to communicate with each other. You will notice that language has three basic characteristics. A. The presence of symbols. B. A set of rules to organize these symbols. And C. Communication. Here we shall be discussing these three characteristics of language. The first characteristic of language is that it involves symbols. Symbols represent something or someone else. For example, the place where you live is called home. The place where you study is called school. The thing that you eat is called food. Words like home, school, food, and numerous other words do not in themselves carry any meaning. When these words are associated when these words are associated with some objects, events, they attain meaning, and we begin recognizing those objects, events, etc. with particular word symbols. We use symbols while thinking. The second characteristics of language is that it involves rules. While combining two or more words, we usually follow definite and accepted order of presenting these words. For example, one would most likely say I am going to school and not school am going I. The third characteristic of languages is that it is used for communicating one's thought, ideas, intentions, and feelings to others. On many occasions, we communicate through the use of our body parts called gestures or postures. This type of communication is called non-verbal communication. Some people who cannot use oral speech, like the ones with severe hearing and speech problems, communicate through signs. Communicate through signs. Sign language is also a form of language. Development of language. Language is a complex system and unique to human beings. Psychologists have tried to teach sign language, use of symbols to chimpanzees, dolphins, parrots, etc. But it is observed that human language is more complex, creative, and spontaneous than the system of communication other animals can learn. There is also a great deal of regularity with which children all over the world seem to be learning the language or languages to which they are exposed. When you compare individual children, you find that they differ a great deal in the rate of their language development as well as in how they go about it. But when you take a general view of children's acquisition of language all over the world, you find some predictable pattern in which children proceed from almost no use of language to the point of becoming competent language users. Language develops through some of the stages discussed now. Newborn babies and young infants make a variety of sounds which gradually get modified to resemble words. The first sound produced by babies is crying. Initial crying is undifferentiated and similar across various situations. Gradually, the pattern of crying varies in its pitch and intensity to signify different states such as hunger, pain, and sleepiness, etc. These different these differentiated these differentiated crying sounds gradually become more meaningful, cooing sounds like ah, oo, etc. Usually to express happiness. At around 6 months of age, children enter the babbling stage. Babbling involves prolonged repetition of a variety of consonants and vowel sounds. For example, da, ba. By about 9 months of age, these sounds get elaborated to strings of some sound combinations such as da into repetitive patterns called echolalia. While the early babblings are random or accidental in nature, the latter babblings seem to be imitative of adult voices. Children show some understanding of a few words by the time Children show some understanding of a few words by the time they are 6 months old. Around the first birthday, the exact age varies from child to child. Most children enter the one word stage. Their first word usually contains one syllable, ma or da for instance. Gradually they move to one or more words which are combined to form whole sentences or phrases. So they are called whole phrases. When they are 18 to 20 months of age, children enter a two-word stage and begin to use two words together. The two-word stage exemplifies telegraphic speech like telegrams, got admission, send money. It contains mostly nouns and verbs. Close to their third birthday, that is beyond 2.5 years, children's language development gets focused on rules of the language they hear. How is language acquired? You must be wondering, how do we learn to speak? As with many other topics in psychology, the question of whether a behavior develops as a result of inherited characteristics, nature, or from the effects of learning nurture has been raised with regard to language. Most psychologists accept that both nature and nurture are important in language acquisition. Behaviorist B.F. Skinner believed we learn language the same way as animals learn to pick keys or press bars. Language development language development for the behaviorists follow the Learning principles such as association, the sight of bottle with the word bottle, imitation adults' use of word bottle, and reinforcement smiles and hugs. When the child says something right, there is also evidence that children produce sounds that are appropriate to a language of the parent or caregiver and are reinforced for having done so. The principle of shaping leads to successive approximation of the desired responses so that the child eventually speaks as well as the adult. Regional differences in pronunciation and phrasing illustrate how different patterns are reinforced in different areas. Linguist Noam Chomsky put forth the innate proposition of development of language. For him, the rate at which children acquire words and grammar without being taught cannot be explained only by learning principles. Children also create all sorts of sentences they have never heard and therefore could not be imitating. Children throughout the world seem to have a period when learning must occur if it is to occur successfully. For learning a language, children across the world also go through the same stages of language development. Chomsky believes language development is just like physical maturation given adequate care. It just happens to the child. Children are born with universal grammar. They readily learn the grammar of whatever language they hear. Skinner's emphasis on learning explains why infants acquire the language they hear and how they add new words to their vocabularies. Chomsky's emphasis on our built in readiness to learn grammar helps explain why children acquire language so readily without direct teaching. Language use. As we have discussed earlier, language use involves knowing socially appropriate ways of communication. Knowledge of vocabulary and syntax of a language does not ensure proper use of language to achieve the purpose of communication in a variety of social situations. When we use language, we have various pragmatic intentions such as requesting, asking, thanking, demanding, etc. In order to effectively serve these social goals, language use must be pragmatically correct or contextually appropriate besides being grammatical and meaningful. Children often have difficulty with choice of appropriate utterances for politeness or for request, and the use of language conveys a demand or a command instead of a polite request. When children are engaged in conversations, they also have difficulty in taking turns in speaking and listening like adults. Bilingualism and bilingualism and multilingualism. Bilingualism refers to attaining proficiency in communicating through any two languages. Learning of more than two languages is referred to as multilingualism. The term mother tongue has been variously defined as one's native language, the language spoken by the individual from the cradle, or language from the cradle, language ordinarily used at home, language spoken by the mother, etc. However, generally, the mother tongue is viewed as a language with which one identifies at the emotional level. It is possible for individuals to have multiple mother tongues. The Indian social context is characterized by grassroots multilingualism, which makes by multilingualism a characteristic at the levels of individual as well as society. Most Indians use more than one language to communicate in various domains of their daily life activities. Thus, multilingualism is a way of life in India. Studies reveal that multilingualism facilitates cognitive, linguistic, and academic competence of children. Summarizing the chapter, thinking is a complex mental process through which we manipulate information either acquired or stored. It is an internal process that can be inferred from behavior. Thinking involves mental representations that are either mental images or concepts. Complex thought processes are problem solving, reasoning, decision making, judgment, and creative thinking. Problem solving is thinking directed towards the solution of a specific problem. Mental set, functional fixedness, lack of motivation, and persistence are some of the hindrances for effective problem solving. Reasoning, like problem solving, is goal directed, involves inference, and can be either deductive or inductive. In making judgment, we draw conclusions, form opinions, make evaluations about objects or events. In decision making, one must choose among several available alternatives. Judgment and decision making are interrelated processes. Creative thinking involves the production of something new and original. It may be an idea, object, or solution to a problem. Developing think, Developing creative thinking requires overcoming blocks to creative expression and using strategies to enhance creative thinking skills and abilities. Language is distinctly human. It consists of symbols organized on the basis of certain rules to communicate intentions, feelings, motives, and desires among human beings. Major development in language occurs during the first 2 to 3 years of age. Language and thought are intricately related. Thank you.